The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week for episode 400. We have made it. We have climbed the mountain together. You, viewers and listeners, me, producer Lauren, all the co-hosts, we did it. We going all the way back to 2015 at episode 001 to where we are today. Think of all the guests we've interviewed. Think of all the friendships we've created. Think of all the opportunities we've created for indie artists. What a great community we have. And it's all thanks to you. Thank you so much for helping us get to this magnificent point. And we need some people to celebrate it with. How about our co-host this week, musician, investor, frontman for Gideon King and City Blog, Gideon King, joining us. Hi, Gideon.
Howdy. Good to be back. Good to be back.
Good to have you here to celebrate this pretty cool milestone. I got to tell you, when we did episode 1 of this particular program all those years ago, I mean, you weren't there for this, but it was a real slipshod operation. I got to be honest with you. We were holding mixing boards together with literal duct tape. It took 2 separate laptop computers that the fans buzzed like crazy. We had cheap microphones. We had to turn off the air conditioner in the room that we did it in because it was so loud. It was picking up on everything. And we interviewed our very first guest. We don't know how the stream or the recording stayed connected the whole time. And now here we are today, live streaming on YouTube and Twitch on Sirius XM 145, interviewing some of the coolest figures in the entertainment industry, amazing policymakers like Representative Deborah Ross, like we had last week, and just building something really special here. And I'm thrilled that we had you come by as of late in these proceedings and join us. And I feel so happy right now that we're here.
Man, 400 shows. That's a hell of a thing, as my old coach used to say. Actually, I don't know if he said that, but someone said that's a hell of a thing to me once. So it's a hell of a thing. Congrats.
Thank you so much. Before we get into the proceedings, and we got a lot of great topics to talk about, we're also going to be joined later in the show by filmmaker Nancy Cates, makes spectacular documentaries about some of the most important figures in our country, and she's doing it independently. And so we don't have nearly enough independent filmmakers on this show. And so I think she's a great person to have for our 400th episode. That's coming up later today. So, or later on this show. So stick around for that. That's going to be a blast. But in the meantime, before we get to her, before we get to some of our topics, I want to take a couple minutes and just be really self-indulgent with you, Gideon, to kind of let you in and let the viewers and listeners in, frankly, on what this means to me. And just, super self-indulgent. We're going to make this all about me for the next 3 minutes because this is a really special moment. Because to me, what episode 400 of this show means, aside from just a terrific amount of ego on my part to think that people wanted to hear my voice for 400 episodes, and perhaps a waste of my time, but what it really means for me, in all honesty, is a proof of concept. Because this story of this podcast and everything it represents goes all the way back to me being a third-year law student and making the decision at that point in my life that I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. It was something that I always kind of flirted with. I used to read Donald Passman's book back in high school, and I would read Billboard magazines every day in class. I used to try to tuck them into my math textbook so I could read the Billboard magazine during class. It never worked because those damn Billboard magazines were so big you could see it like on the outside of the book. But this was something that meant a lot to me. And so by my third year of law school, I'd made a decision. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with creative professionals. I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. And Everything in the industry told me that's not something you're going to get to do. Every law firm I interviewed with in law school said, if you work for us, you won't be doing entertainment law. There's not enough entertainment law work out there. We have one guy at the firm that does entertainment law. He hoards his work because he's been doing it for 20 years. He doesn't want to train his competition by giving you some of his work. This is a very niche field. You got to usually do something else for 10 or 15 years, and then maybe you can transition into entertainment law. But it's not something you're going to get to do at this firm. And so, I was getting doors slammed in my face, further compounded by the fact that this was 2009, 2011, in that range. So it's the height of the financial crisis, of something that I know you're intimately familiar with, Gideon. And so there's just no jobs of any kind, right? So, I mean, I was being told, look, you're lucky to find any legal job. Stop trying to find something in this dream field of entertainment law that you want to do, because you're going to be lucky to practice anything given the current state of the economy. And so when I graduated from law school pretty early on in my career, I kind of made a bet on myself and said, if I'm not going to get an opportunity at a law firm to practice this law, if no veteran entertainment lawyer is going to take me under their wing to show me the ropes, because again, these older entertainment lawyers did not want to train the next generation. They don't want to trade their competition. I'm going to do it myself. And I'm going to start this project myself. I'm going to take any musicians that come in the door. I'm going to offer my services at frustratingly low rates because I just want to get experience. I want to learn about this field. And along the way, I told myself, we're going to help these people. And so I was doing lots of pro bono work. I wrote the Break the Business book because I just wanted to give the information away for free. There was huge information asymmetry between these big labels, these big record companies, and the musicians I worked with. I wanted to level the playing field, so I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then from that begat the podcast. And along the way, as we were informing people, I started to build my own kind of niche and my own kind of practice. The more I talked about this stuff, the more I built up this podcast, the more it built my legal practice. And so I was able to create an entertainment law practice helping indie creators out of nothing because there wasn't a law firm that was willing to take me under their wing. And so to me, when I say that this podcast is a proof of concept, it represents what I wanted to happen, which was getting to be a person who could help indie creators, building my practice while building this podcast along the way, making tons of connections in the entertainment industry that I would never have been able to make but for doing this show, up to and including meeting people like you, Gideon. And if you told me 10 years ago or 400 episodes ago when we started this in 2015 that this is where I'd be now, I'd say you were dreaming. And it's so great to be here. And I'm hopeful that it's just the beginning, that 400 episodes from now, we're having another conversation about what this has become and all the people we're helping and the relationships we've created for the viewers and listeners along the way. And it's wonderful.
I mean, the thing is, you did what people do when they have success at something, which is you adopted the brick by brick methodology. If you don't accept whether you're building a band or a podcast or a woodshed to store wood in, that you're doing it brick by brick, then you're not realistic and you're not real. Man, if you're still in the brick by brick mood, then you'll be talking about the same type of thing at your 800th show. In my view, I'm not just saying that because I'm on the show. I'm saying it because everything I've ever done that is successful. Not saying that I've done that many things that have been successful, but I've done a few. It's always brick by brick. It's painful. It's exciting. And it's frustrating and it's rewarding, but brick by brick is the only way, unless, you want to write a hit song and, be on tour with Taylor Swift, which I know is your longtime crush. That's really your goal.
That'd be pretty rad. I'll take that. That's, as satisfying as this journey has been, doing it brick by brick, as you so aptly put it, I'll absolutely take the fast track, write a song with Taylor Swift route if we can swing that. But in the meantime, This is a pretty good situation too, and I'm grateful to have it. And the list of people that would need to be thanked to properly credit all the folks that have made this happen is an entirely too long one. Starting with co-hosts like you and Katie and Zach and producer Lauren, and a lot of the co-hosts that we've had along the way who've joined us for various periods. Elisa Rockdock, Metal Dave, going all the way back to episode 1. My dearest friend going back since we were like 12 years old. And, the hundreds of guests that we've had on the show, and the viewers and listeners we've built, the viewers and listeners who have along the way become clients of mine, obviously people that I treasure and think really highly of, and it's terrific. And so, I mean, in lieu of doing some kind of thing for episode 400 where we have some silly kind of stuff that we did like for episode 300 where we had like goofy songs and break the business trivia and things like that, I thought I would just be heartfelt this week or this time around for this milestone.
I dig it.
But anyway, we in the midst of all this, we do have a show to do. And I wanted to start with one more piece of horn tooting for us. Our interview last week with Representative Deborah Ross about the Protect Working Musicians Act caught a little bit of fire, as I imagine things do when you interview a sitting member of Congress. But we had an article about our interview picked up in Hypebot, and I've been told there are some other publications that are asking about this interview as well, because we were basically the first media outlet to do a radio interview with Representative Deborah Ross about this really important piece of legislation that would allow independent musicians to level the playing field in negotiations with platforms like Spotify for collective bargaining. And so that's really, really cool. And it's nice to see that happen. And it's nice that we played even a small part in continuing that really important conversation around this great piece of legislation, because if there was ever something, Gideon, that demonstrated the need for why we need laws like the Protect Working Musicians Act that would increase the bargaining power of independent musicians when negotiating with Spotify, we got it in the form of a recent website that was created by the law firm Manat Phelps and Phillips, that they put out their own version of a streaming calculator that shows people just how little these major streaming services can pay, particularly what I think is the worst offender in this space, which is Spotify, who is also the largest streaming service. Lauren, if you could, can you put up the website, this Manat website, the streaming calculator they put together? I really like this webpage because it's super user-friendly. All you got to do is just type in how many streams your song gets, and it will tell you exactly how much Spotify would pay for those streams and how much Apple Music would pay for those streams. Simple. And what I like about it is it does demonstrate the stark difference between how little Spotify pays its artists and how slightly better Apple Music is. So if you could, Lauren, like just to demonstrate this for Gideon, can you go and just type in 1 million streams? Which is by any objective measure, most artists would be thrilled to have 1 million streams. I think that's 1 billion that you just typed in, which would be really great. There we go. 1 million streams of a song,
about
right?
Yeah.
And so you can see from looking at the calculator, and I'll narrate it here for the radio and podcasting audience. If you get 1 million streams, now this model assumes that you own everything about this work. You are the sole writer of this particular track, and you own 100% of the track. There's no labels skimming royalties. There's no publishing company that has a co-pub deal with you that's taking half your copyright. This assumes you own everything. If you have your song streamed 1 million times, which we'd all be pretty happy with, most independent artists would be happy to have their music streamed 1 million times, Spotify will pay you $4,798, and Apple Music will pay you $8,803. So a little bit more. And to break this down into per stream amounts, Gideon, I crunched the numbers here, and they say lawyers are bad at math. The Apple, who pays a little bit better, will actually pay the artist, all in, including songwriter royalties and recording artist royalties, about 0.8 cents per stream, almost a penny per stream. And of that amount, what I think the other thing that this calculator does, which is really cool, if you scroll down, Lauren, it actually shows you how much Apple keeps as its cut. And so if you stream your music 1 million times, Apple takes about 2 to 3/10 cents per stream, which is effectively like a 22% commission. So they take about 1/5 of all the money that your song generates for their service. Contrast that with Spotify, that is paying, that pays you less than 0.5 of a cent per stream, so less than half of a cent per stream, so a lot less than Apple, and pays itself about the same, and keeps about the same amount as Spotify does, or Apple Music does, about 2 to 3 tenths of a cent per stream. But because it's paying the artist less, it is effectively keeping 32% of the money that song generates. So Apple is, so if you put it down into numbers, for its work, Apple is taking about 1/5 of the money generated. Spotify is taking 1/3. And it's crazy to walk through this, but I think that is, it's a stark demonstration of how very different these services are. Now, a lot of people will ask, why does Spotify pay so much less? Why is Spotify giving artists 0.5 of a cent per stream, and why is Apple paying 0.8 of a cent? Now, we can't obviously look into Spotify's books and kind of get a straight answer on this, but the conventional wisdom is what's happening here is that Spotify just isn't bringing in as much money per stream as Apple Music is. Spotify has a free tier. A lot of Spotify's users are not paying anything for the music that they stream. They're getting ads. And so Spotify is getting less money in per stream than Apple does, which just has a completely monthly payment subscription model, no free tier. And so as a consequence of that, Apple can pay a lot more per stream than Spotify does. So when I think Gideon, sorry, go ahead.
There's also, you got to consider the ecosystems that these DSPs are in. The Apple Music is embedded in the device. And because Apple Music is embedded in the device, Apple is getting a benefit from that embed, if you want to use that term of art, that has an incredible economic impact for them. It is keeping people inside the four corners of that phone. It's keeping people right in the environment that they want to keep people in. So the fact that they pay out more, sort of considered in an abstract tunnel, is noteworthy, but to me not as meaningful, because Spotify is a discrete commercial entity formed for the purpose of being a digital streaming platform. And they are what they are, and they have to stand on their own 2 feet and make it through the jungle themselves. Not that I'm defending them as an altruistic entity, but it is really, really different because Apple gets benefits that Spotify could never dream of, having this service embedded in their phone. So the fact that, Spotify pays a little less is, I suppose, disappointing on the margin, but for me, completely understandable, given that they are two completely different beasts in a completely different jungle.
That does make some intuitive sense, but I think on the other side of that, there are a couple considerations that come to mind for me. One is, even though Apple is embedded on people's devices, if you are an iPhone user, Spotify has larger market share. So it's not like Spotify is trailing Apple Music. And obviously, if you are an Android user or a Pixel user or something like that, you're not going to have Apple Music on your phone. So Spotify is the market leader, and they're still paying the least. Yeah. Furthermore, there are some other non-native streaming services like Napster or like Tidal, which pay more than Spotify does. And they don't have the market share that Spotify does. I think to the point of Deborah Ross's legislation, the Protect Working Musicians Act, one way that this could be addressed is through some kind of legislation that would allow independent creators to band together and collectively bargain with Spotify and say, hey, Spotify, if you want all of our music, if you want, we're a consortium, a union of sorts that represents 10,000, 100,000 independent musicians. If you want all of our music on your streaming service, you have to pay out something closer to what Apple Music pays or what Tidal pays. And, perhaps that could be the solution to something like this. But, to me, this is untenable. And, and if we're going to stay in an industry where we want recorded music to be a reliable source of income for independent creators, this model has to change. Because right now it's a model where the vast, 99%, 95, 99% of musicians cannot make a living wage on their recorded music as long as we are a streaming first industry when it comes to recorded music.
But the countervailing force to all of that hopeful stuff, musicians in effect unionizing, exercising collective bargaining power, the countervailing force, which to me is not just a force but a tidal wave, is that the distribution, and we can talk more about this later in the episode, but the distribution of music has become so democratized that convincing some person who can just literally upload their music onto Spotify and get it out there, so to speak, and get it out there quickly, is so powerful that getting enough people to be part of a movement to collectively bargain will not be easy, because there will be many people who just say, I am so incredibly pleased just to get my next release out there in this environment, which sort of avails me of the shot. It avails me of the big shot that I might go viral. I might get good algo streaming on Spotify. So there is a kind of, I don't want to say insidious. Yeah, I do want to say insidious. There's an insidious democracy, if you want to put it that way, to the construct of Spotify. And Apple Music, again, I regard as a different beast, but that for me will make that type of organization, that labor organization that you're sort of alluding to, it ain't going to make it easy. It's going to make it complex, hard, messy, and maybe not possible. Maybe.
I'd like to pick up on what you were saying there about how there's always going to be musicians that just want to get their music out there and are trying to just make their stuff go viral, and they could be willing to give up a lot to make that music go viral. And I think that's absolutely true. I know plenty of musicians just like that. And I think it's that impulse that a lot of artists share that I think could lead to the scenario that former Break the Business guest Rob Abelo brought up in a tweet recently, talking about like what the next, what like the end game could be, or at least the next wave could be for streaming, as streaming platforms are looking to make more money off of off of this industry, and might decide that instead of taking money just from the music consumers, maybe there are ways to take money from the actual musicians themselves. Lauren, can you put up the Rob Abelo tweet for us? He always has the best tweets about the industry, really thought-provoking stuff. So recently Rob wrote, and I'll read it out here for the viewers and for the listening audience. He said, quote, music streamers will become increasingly paid, or he started by saying, bold prediction, music streamers will become increasingly pay to play as they look to drive revenue and realize creators are willing to spend far more money than consumers ever will for mass consumption. Right to your point there, Gideon. Continuing, they will charge for things like playlist pitching, annual track hosting, boosts to reach your own audience. Initial versions of this are already happening, and the music industry is like a frog slowly boiling in water, happily paying to cut in line for a sliver of your attention. 1, the experience for listeners will deteriorate, and 2, people will find better options. These will be mostly direct-to-fan, powered by communities and collectives, as the artist-fan experience moves from mega platforms to artist-centric spaces. Give it 5 years. Now, I'm not so sure about the second part of what he's bringing up there about how this could cause people to distance themselves from streaming platforms and that whole model. I am more concerned about the first part of Robert's tweet about how streaming services could say, man, there are a lot of musicians out there desperate for attention on our platforms, desperate to get favored by our streaming services algorithm to put their music in front of more people's ears. I bet these viewers and listeners might be willing to pay for that privilege. And lest you think that I am being ridiculous about this, keep in mind that it was only since about 2020, Spotify has actually had a feature where artists can agree to take a lesser stream payout in exchange for a boost on Spotify's algorithm. So we're already seeing some version of this. What Rob is predicting is just kind of the next level of it, where it's going to be, instead of getting a reduction in your stream payout for an algorithmic boost, we're just going to let you pay us directly, artist, for an algorithmic boost. And I think a lot of people would be willing to pay for that, which just, seems quite troublesome to me.
I mean, look, when I dissect this tweet, and I just read it again along with you, I have a few reactions. Reaction my overall reaction is he's completely wrong and he's completely right. One of the places, how's that for hedging?
Yeah.
How's that for saying a lot and saying nothing? So where he's completely wrong is if he thinks that the experience for listeners will deteriorate, that's not what's going to happen. Spotify, Deezer, AudioMac, DSPs are technology platforms. That's like predicting that your dashboard on the next Toyota 5 years from now is not going to be as advanced. These are technology platforms which will become more and more advanced. They will offer more intuitive services, more AI playlists that are customized to what you like, what you might like, and that's already happening. So that isn't going to happen. These large monopolistic technology beasts are not going to cannibalize the very essence of what they offer, which is a growingly seamless and frankly awesome way to listen to music. I know I consume Spotify like like someone in the desert who needs water. So that's off base to me. What he is getting at in two ways, and another thing. Well, there's another thing that's off base. Here's the thing: everybody is saying that the new model is going to be artists going direct to consumer. And in fairness, if you're Ed Sheeran or you're John Legend or Taylor Swift, yes, you can get people potentially to pay a premium to get access to, pictures of you eating pizza and posting and dancing with your friends on Halloween. But if you're a mid-tier artist, which most of the market is, you're not going to get users. In fact, I've spoken to managers as recently as this week who said it's completely impossible. This artist economy direct to consumer thing sounds really elegant and sounds really great, but it doesn't work because when you have a mid-tier artist who's a person that sells 8,000 tickets, that's not mid-tier, but a successful artist that sells 8,000 tickets a night, while their fans love them, their fans are not going to pay an extra $4 a month or even $10 a month just to get their few sort of direct consumer tweets, pictures, communications. Okay, they're not going to do that. One, because for those prices to make the model work, you can get the world at your feet. You can get Netflix for $9 and Spotify for $9. So that's been tried by managers and artists all over the place, and it thus far has really failed. Because artists spend an immense amount of time putting that together, one. And two, fans don't seem to be buying into it unless it's fans of an absolute cult like Taylor Swift. So we should be careful to assume that is really going to take hold. Where I do think he's striking at some really important things is the money. The money flow is all screwed up. Think of it. The distributors get billions of songs. They get paid by their artists on those songs. And then they offload to the streaming services, Spotify, billions of songs, and Spotify has to ingest it, organize it technologically, and then send it out to the consumer in a seamless technological package replete with, again, intuitive AI functions. And so the distributors are getting the money, but Spotify isn't. And right now, Spotify is barely breaking even as a public stock. And so something's got to shift where the DSPs somehow change the economic balance of the industry and say, hey, wait a minute. We got to get paid for ingesting millions of songs a day, most of which, frankly, are economically worthless units. And so that's a really fascinating imbalance that I think has to be or will ultimately be corrected, because while we tend to demonize Spotify for not paying artists enough, actually what it might be is that artists are paying the distributors too much, or perhaps not being allowed to spread their dollars out in a way that's most efficient, if you sort of hear where I'm coming from. And one more thing, and then I'll move on. Spotify right now, you can do three things. You can do Spotify Marquee. I do it, okay? You go on Spotify Marquee, and basically that allows you, when you release a new song, to make sure all of your followers are notified. That's one thing you can do. You can do an ad and say, hey, I'm Gideon King, I'm Ryan Kairalla, we're releasing our new duet song together. And by the way,
would love that.
And people will love that. We're going to sing. We should sing together and pole dance and pole dance. You
No,
can
that's
do
the
that.
subscription model. You got to pay $5 a
Totally
month for that.
Totally. But you can do that. But by the way, those ads only go out to non-paying subscribers for Spotify. So who you're really hitting and who you're really engaging, not so easy to decipher. And then again, if you're John Legend or Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift, you can do the banner on the website and have your face on the website. But that would cost a fortune for lowly artists like me, or would be given away free to Taylor Swift. So he's so right in his tweet that artists are paying for more of these type of marquee services, and that will continue on. But I got to tell you, I just think Spotify is going to get bigger and wiser and more seamless. And I think that about the bigger players. So I think his tweet is exciting and sort of riles up the animal instincts, but most of it doesn't happen.
I mean, the second piece of it, right? The artists all leaving Spotify en masse to create these direct to fan platforms. That's I think, at least at a wide scale, that's wishful thinking. Certainly, we have plenty of evidence of isolated use cases that we've chronicled on this program of artists who have developed these communities on platforms like Patreon and are making lots of money from it. But they'll be the first one to tell you, to what you said, Gideon, they had to invest a lot of resources into that. They had to spend years building that fan base, developing that fan base, getting those fans to love them enough that they're willing to part with their dollars consistently on a monthly basis. That's not something you're going to get just because you've written a good song. Those people are putting time and money into building a fan base to make them that rabid. And so that's not something that's just going to be able to be done for artists across the board. Those are isolated use cases. But everything else that he brought up there about how the streaming platforms are going to start trying to take money from artists. That's going to happen. That's already happening. And I think as Spotify continues to grow and effectively kind of gets a monopoly over this sector, like I think they are working their way towards just being the only real player in this space. I mean, aside from Apple Music, which again is just sort of limited to people who have iPhones, and Spotify's still bigger. The bigger they get, the more power they're going to have to say, we're going to pay you even less than we do now, because we said so. Good luck having anybody know of your music if you don't have your music on our streaming service.
Now,
which
Ryan,
again
one thing
speaks to why we need things like perhaps collective action to help artists band together, level the playing field. And as you noted, that's not an easy thing, right? Getting hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of independent musicians to collectively work together is quite an exercise in cat herding. But from where I'm sitting, I'm not seeing what else is the way to fix this.
It's a hard it's a super hard problem. I mean, as you and I have discussed before on the show, the role that music plays in people's lives, the entire economic construct of the business, music has become more commoditized than ever. So it's a really hard problem. The other thing that's mentioned, which I think is a really interesting question, he mentions artists potentially paying Spotify for a greater exposure to playlists. Obviously, the holy grail when you release your song, although I'm not sure it should be, but one of the holy grails when you really, when I release a song, I call up my manager and I say, hey, how's it going? We on any editorial playlists on Spotify, right? I must call them 4 times a week, right? I can't imagine how annoying I must be. But on the other hand, to be able to pay to get greater exposure to playlists is such a direct hit at the kind of open architecture, democratic nature of what Spotify is in theory supposed to be, that I wonder again if that's actually going to happen, Ryan?
I mean, it's payola. If this were terrestrial radio, it would be a violation of federal law.
That's
when
where
Spotify does it, we're just going to call it good business.
That's what I'm getting at, and that's why I think they're going to be very careful about these things. But, man, who the hell knows? It's hard.
It does sound like a great way to immediately attract the attention of Congress and get them pretty upset with you. Totally. All right, let's take a break. I'm really, really excited to talk to Nancy Cates after this. A terrific independent filmmaker. Let me give a little bit of background before we bring her in, before we go to break, just to let people know how cool this particular guest is going to be. So 20 years ago, our guest Nancy Cates made a documentary called Brother Outsider, The Life of Bayard Rustin, Bayard Rustin, the civil rights leader. And in 2023, Netflix is going to create a feature film that has all these A-list celebrities in it about Bayard Rustin. It's got all these A-list celebrities in it. It's executive produced by the Obamas. And it's going to come out, and that's going to be really wild. And a lot of people are crediting Nancy's documentary with sort of igniting our conscious, the collective conscious about this person's life and getting us to this point where now we have this Netflix feature film. So, and it was all done by an independent filmmaker. So excited to talk to her about that. Don't go anywhere. We got Nancy Cates coming up next on Break the Business.
Ryan Kairalla here. I hope you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you're getting a lot out of it. I do what I do because I care about creators like you. A lot. I've dedicated my career to helping creative professionals, entrepreneurs, and organizations move forward. I do it by hosting this program, and I'm also proud to do it in my legal practice. If you're a creative professional looking for solutions-oriented legal services to help you further your goals, I'd love to help. My firm RKPA does contracts, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Visit rkpalaw.com to learn more. That's rkpalaw.com. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome back to Break the Business, everybody. Ryan Kairalla here with Gideon King, celebrating episode 400 of this delightful little program. I love that sound effect. It's so stupid. I think it's like a garage band sound effect. We've just kept it ever since. And wherever you're checking us out, wherever you have checked us out over the years, whether it was the very early podcast days up until now where we have the live streaming or SiriusXM 145, wherever you are checking out this program, however long you've been with us, even if you're one of the diehards going back to 2015, we are just so happy to be here with you and to deliver this program week after week. Let's go ahead and bring out our guest, Gideon. She is an acclaimed documentary filmmaker whose works include the iconic 2003 doc Brother Outsider, The Life of Bayard Rustin. With the upcoming release of the Netflix feature film biopic on Bayard Rustin's life, many have been inspired recently to look back on our guest's original documentary on the iconic civil rights leader. We are excited to talk to her all about this. Let us welcome Nancy Cates on to Break the Business. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
So thrilled to be chatting with you. Can I be completely honest with you, Nancy? And you've probably heard this before, at least I hope you've heard this before, or else I'll probably feel really dumb saying this. But I went through, years of public school and took all kinds of history classes and never learned about Bayard Rustin. The first time I came across this civil rights figure who was an important figure in American history was through documentaries like yours and through reading about him later in life. I don't know if you've heard those kind of sentiments before from others and the role your documentary played, but for the viewers and listeners out there who might not be familiar, can you, one, talk a little bit about that, and two, can you give us a little bit of background on who Bayard Rustin was?
Sure. Well, let me take the first one first. We don't really teach history very well in this country, I'm afraid. I mean, I had the best education that you can have in America. I think I'm allowed to say that. And I didn't hear about Bayard Rustin in school either. I mean, times were different. Unfortunately, our educational system is about one person. So if you think about the March on Washington in 1963, you're going to think about Dr. King making his very, very important speech at the end of the day, but you're not going to think about Bayard Rustin, who organized that whole march and got 250,000 people to Washington, D.C., which had never been done before. But, as a queer person, as an African-American person, these figures in general are not taught enough in American schools. I mean, this is changing. Like California has, I think it's AB 105, which requires California schools to teach, Latino history, Native American history, feminist and women's history. But I don't know that it's actually enforced. There's now a law here, but this is California. I don't know what it's like, say, in Florida.
We don't have any problems,
No, but I mean, in other words, like we have
teaching stuff in Florida.
We have public schools, but we don't necessarily have public history in those schools. And I can't solve this problem, although it's very gratifying to me that my work is shown in schools all the time to try to, in some ways, rectify this a little bit.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't really mean to go down that road about Florida, but I wasn't doing that on purpose, but we can talk about that if you want to. Is this being broadcast in Florida? Can we say gay?
It gets bleeped in Florida.
I'm so sorry. I guess we're not in a school right at the moment. So who Bayard Rustin was. So Rustin was raised in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is not far from Philadelphia, but it seems like another universe. He attended several different Black schools, colleges, and he was kind of a troublemaker. So he got thrown out of at least one of them. Like the food at one of them was very bad. So he organized a protest to improve the food at his college, and he got thrown out. He went to New York. He was a very gifted singer, among other things. So for a while, he sang with Josh White and the Carolinians, and could have been a professional musician, but he did record a couple of albums, but that wasn't, where his genius was. And he started working as an organizer in various ways with African-American leaders, with, peace activists. There was a group called the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which was founded by a man named A.J. Musty. I mean, all of this is a little bit more detailed than maybe you need, but he had been doing nonviolent protest work for a long time prior to what we consider the modern civil rights movement and Martin Luther King. And in fact, when the Montgomery bus boycott started in the 50s, Rustin went there to educate King. Like, Rustin never became as famous as Dr. King, but he was a very important mentor and an ally of King's, and really had like brilliant strategic thinking about how to achieve civil rights in the 50s and 60s. So I hope that's enough of an introduction.
Yeah, and what was happening there that Rustin's name wasn't being amplified alongside the other civil rights leaders at the time, folks like Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks or John Lewis or these folks? Was it just the fact that he was LGBT, and so there was this notion that, progress could only sort of happen one step at a time, and inviting intersectionality into this civil rights movement of that era was, they thought, the civil rights leaders at the time thought that to be a bridge too far?
Well, he was considered a target for people who wanted to discredit the movement. There was one of the reasons that Dr. King started the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was actually Rustin's idea, that ministers would lead the civil rights movement, is that it was thought that everyone had to be absolutely morally impeccable, because otherwise they would be discredited. And so by being gay, at that time, he was seen as being sort of morally suspicious, and also the target of blackmail. And people did try to blackmail him in different ways, or discredit the movement by association with him. So, he understood the realities of this. There was people were playing very hardcore politics, before the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Act. You wanted to get your goals achieved. So even though it was very unfair at times, the way he was treated, he saw the larger goal of achieving civil rights as more important than, maybe his own place in the firmament. I mean, I can't speak for him, but I think that that's true. And similarly, King at one point stepped away from him because he was being threatened by one of his own allies, who wanted something from him, Adam Clayton Powell. Rustin was just too easy a target. I think, for enemies
Yeah.
within and without the civil rights movement.
Well-
Or not enemies within, but people who disagreed with King or what have you.
And because of works like yours, we're finally starting to establish the legacy of Bayard Rustin now in modern times. And, I think about the documentary you made back in 2003 about his life. And now here we are 20 years later, we're on the precipice of a major motion picture that's being distributed by Netflix about Rustin's life. That's got a bunch of A-listers in it. It's got the Obamas executive producing. Do you feel that your film played a role in helping bring Rustin's life to Hollywood's attention?
Oh, absolutely. And also the Obamas gave him a Medal of Freedom in 2013 posthumously. And then President Obama quoted from our movie. So clearly we brought him to the Obamas' attention as well. I wish maybe they had asked me to consult or something, but they didn't. But clearly they used our film. There's archival footage in the narrative film that, is in our film. And they also recreate some of the archival footage so that the actors can be in the shot, which is a little painful for a documentary filmmaker to see. But I understand why they did it, of course.
But I mean, it is a common lament of something I hear from documentary filmmakers, particularly independent documentary filmmakers, which is you often will move the ball forward on a lot of important conversations. And then when the ball moves forward, people forget to sort of acknowledge the person that, started the conversation in the first place. It is in many ways a thankless endeavor that folks in your position do, Nancy, but nonetheless an important one. And certainly we acknowledge the great work that you and your team did here. How did you get your start in filmmaking? I'm always interested in hearing the origin stories of indie filmmakers.
Thank you for asking. So I was a journalist in New York and Boston, print journalist. Oh, here comes my cat. I don't know if cats are allowed on podcasts, but
we always welcome pets. It's a tradition for the last 400 episodes of this show. Whenever pets show up, they are always welcome here, especially adorable cats like this one.
Well, this is always Scale, which is not the most adorable part, but maybe she'll turn around for the audience. Come on.
I don't know what it is about when people come on our show, Gideon. Like maybe when something about when people are talking about their lives, like it just makes their cats just want to be close to them and get right in front of the camera.
I don't know. Maybe she's more exciting than I am. I have no idea.
Safe to say that your cat's butt is the highlight of this 400th show. 400 episodes on the air. I wouldn't have it any other way.
He's upstaging me. So unfair. All right. So I'm going to try to answer your question. So I was a print journalist, and I was asked to do this little sort of video, like accompaniment to something I wrote, and I worked with an editor, and I made a little music edit actually that the editor didn't make. I was like, can't we do this? And I didn't know anything about editing. And I just had this feeling in the pit of my stomach, like, wow, I have to do this, which is really I do not encourage people to make career decisions based on something like a feeling in the pit of your stomach. But I wound up applying to Stanford's documentary program and going there and just feeling like, yes, this is, I liked writing, but there was something about using all the different elements of, sound design and music and, images and words that I just found very exciting and still do actually. So that's where it started.
And how has the work that you do changed since when you started? Like what things are most different about the work that independent filmmakers, documentary filmmakers do today versus say 20 years ago or 25 years ago?
Well, sadly, I went to film school when they were still using 16 millimeter. And as soon as they left, they bought all the computers. So I kind of was trained in the 1920s technology. And now I live in the 21st century, and I'm still a little resentful.
I'm envisioning you like walking out with your graduation regalia and they're just wheeling in all the computers. And
it was kind of like that. I mean, I was very fortunate. I made a film about American women who served in the Vietnam War that received the Student Academy Award in 1995. But yeah, that was like the high point, and the low point was realizing that I had not been trained on nonlinear editing systems, which were going to become, immediately become the standard for how people make films. But on the other hand, I actually think that was an amazing thing to learn. And there's something about touching film and touching mag, which is what you put audio on, that, it's kind of this lost thing, the way people no longer take pictures with actual photographic film. They take them with their phones or digital cameras. But, it was a wonderful thing to learn. It was just, unfortunately, a little bit out of sync with what was going on in technology.
Nancy, I have a question for you.
Sure.
First of all, congratulations on this, on your body of work, frankly, all of it. You know what? I knew he was going to do that.
That's the highlight.
By the way, I almost didn't say it because I thought he would not be able to control it, but it's his show, so there's nothing we could do about it. So you know what? One of the things that I'm frightened by nowadays, I sound like an old guy nowadays. One of the things I'm frightened by is the extent to which people rely on social media for their information. And you don't strike me as someone whose life goal it is to have 100,000 followers on Instagram, unless I've greatly misjudged your psyche.
I'm not even interested in Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm sort of getting at. So I just wonder, in today's world where the multiplicative effect of social media on information distribution is like scary, dangerous, factually bereft, and sort of just like horrid. I'm wondering if you view your role as a documentarian, and I don't know that that's a right word, a documentary filmmaker. Let's say that sounds more accurate. I wonder if you view your role as different, more important, as it's sort of juxtaposed against this other form of documenting, in quotes, the truth, which is Instagram and TikTok and so on. Because I personally love documentaries. It's just nice to see a slow cooked treatment of a subject. And so I'm wondering where you feel you fit in that world, and what your reaction to social media is, or are you're just a documentary filmmaker? You're going to do what you're going to do, and just your general comments on your business versus that business, if you get my drift.
I was listening to you earlier when you were talking about Spotify and Apple, and I was getting really bummed out. And so this
sorry,
continuing bummer. I mean, Gideon, I say this with genuine affection here, but I don't even know how to address. It's a good question that you're raising. I think that people who write books and people who take years making films, we are slow cooked. Is, I don't know if I like that word, but yeah, it does take years to make our work, and we do it very carefully. It's not, there's a place for both, right? Like, would we know anything about police brutality if people weren't taking video on their cell phone?
Yeah.
Like, that's citizen journalism that actually advances the conversation, and documents atrocities, that wouldn't otherwise, there was no one there when people were getting the crap beaten out of them, like Bayard Rustin was in the 40s when he would do solo bus protests, just to go back to him for a second. There weren't any cell phones there. And I think, this is a really huge question that's, kind of like philosophical rather than podcastical or whatever that term is.
Yeah.
I'm a little shocked here, Gideon. I felt like you really opened the door for Nancy to trash Instagram, and that's what we all wanted. And instead, we got this really terrific, nuanced answer about the different roles of depicting the world that documentarians offer versus social media. We wanted blood, Nancy.
Well, I think the thing is that I am old enough that I find the social media landscape a little bewildering. Bewildering. I don't.
Yeah.
I also find it incredibly narcissistic for most people. Like I use Facebook, which is now, I guess, very out of fashion with the youngsters. But it's like, here I am, me. Like, I hate that about Facebook. And one of my friends said, well, it's really just there to promote your personal brand as a filmmaker. And I said, oh, thank you for explaining that. So all my cute cat pictures, they don't care. No one cares about that. But it's a little confusing. I guess I'm pretty old school. And by the way, I should just mention that my brother is in the music business. So all the stuff about music is actually kind of interesting. And he would probably have a lot to say about what you were talking about. he was an A&R guy at Geffen in the past. So one kind of fun thing about being his sister is I've met a lot of musicians in my time. Just, to further confuse this conversation, which is already a little, it's rich. It's all over the place. But did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah, you sort of said, hey, it's a mix. And you also sort of said it would take 100,000 hours to really get into it. It was
well,
the subtext of what you were saying.
There's a lot of dreck, obviously, on the internet. But I do think that we should credit people who are standing by when something very terrible happens and manage to take video of it and therefore have a means to broadcast it to the world.
Nancy, is the word dreck a technical Harvard term that you learned back in your days at Harvard, or is it?
That's not fair. Well, you were the one who started trashing Instagram. I'm just your guest here.
You're right. You're right. It's Ryan needs to blow his noisemaker now. That's the only thing that can happen.
I mean, I was very surprised but impressed by your answer, Nancy. I thought you were going to go like the way that Martin Scorsese does when anybody brings up to him like films coming out in any format other than 3 hours in a cinema, where he just gets like really angry. Like I thought for sure that's where this was going, but you, like, let it be said, much more nuanced than Scorsese.
Well, that's very kind. He once made a film. I made a film about Susan Sontag, and he made a film about the New York Review of Books that came out at the same time.
Oh.
And it was sort of my glory that, I think The Guardian or some paper in the UK said that my film was better. We were at the same film festival.
Well, I think that's worth this. Yeah, there you go.
Patricia Clarkson, she didn't tell me that she was also playing Susan Sontag's voice in his movie, which came out at the same time. She was the voice of Susan Sontag in my movie. And I was like, really? You didn't tell me? I mean, obviously I'm not Martin Scorsese, but
She was really hedging her bets there with that. What projects are you working on right now? I'm curious. Anything slow cooking at the moment?
I'm starting a film about someone that I seriously doubt either of you have heard of, but I could be wrong. I don't want to. It's a film about a woman named Urvashi Vaude, who had been the head of the Gay and Lesbian Task Force in the 1990s. She very sadly died of cancer in 2022, but she's kind of like a latter-day Rustin. She was this very, very influential activist and executive director who, led some organizations at a very difficult time in the gay movement. And here was the cat again. I guess maybe he's here to make sure that I don't get too carried away with anything, keep it real. So we're just getting, I've been researching her life and getting to know her family, and we're still in fairly early days, but it's interesting 20 years after finishing the Rustin film to be starting another film about a very important but not that well-known activist who's also, who's queer and a person of color. And of course, the cat is playing with the lamp shade to add some audio to. Hi, Lauren.
Well, hey, I'm hiding backstage most of the time. You can't see me. But I wanted to say when you mentioned you might not have heard this person, the first thing that popped in my head is I wanted to say thank you actually for bringing these people to my attention, because there's a lot of people making things about people we all know and hear about all the time. And I have a lot of appreciation for you and filmmakers that take the time and effort to tell the stories that haven't been told about the people that you see value in our history. So my 2 cents while I pop off backstage was thank you for that. Yes, I've never heard of that person, but I'm looking forward to it because I know you're about to tell that story. And that's exciting to me.
Oh, that's very kind. Well, there have been an awful lot of recent, celebrity documentaries, Taylor Swift and this and that person. And, it's fun, but they do get a lot of attention already. I'm much more interested in people who maybe are marginalized, but show something about America and show something about the world we're living in. And I try to make films about the queer community. So I also, I make queer films, so that we can think about things maybe a little bit differently than Taylor Swift. Nothing against Taylor Swift.
Well, I'm thinking all right, I imagine this documentary is going to be incredible. And 20 years from now, when Netflix makes a movie about it, how about throwing Nancy an executive producer credit or something? I mean, come on. Nancy, this has been awesome. We're going to definitely keep an eye out for that documentary. Big fans of your work here. One last question before we let you go. Do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Well, I think the cat is literally trying to get the mic. It's hilarious. Don't let your cat upstage you. That's one.
I need the cat to meow on the mic right at the end of the interview. It would just be the
wants
perfect
attention,
dismount to this excellent
She's like,
conversation.
okay, whatever
The cat's
they're
tail
doing.
again.
What they're doing on the computer, but what about me? I think it's about perseverance. Here,
You're certainly
I can't take
persevering right
myself
now.
seriously. Here we go. Again, I guess I should have put her in another room here. I'm so sorry, but if I haven't been interesting, maybe the cat's been entertaining at least. No, I think it's about keeping going. I mean, whether you're a musician or you're a writer, it's not easy. It's very challenging to be indie anything or to be an artist. But just, I sometimes say that being stubborn, it's like not a very good trait as a human being, but it's really essential as a filmmaker or an artist. It's just don't give up. I was told over and over again we would never finish the film on Susan Sontag, that nobody cared about this, that I would never raise the money to do it. And it's been shown in 35 countries. And I'm not saying that to brag, but it's just like I couldn't listen to the people who said stop. So I don't know if that's good advice or just there's the cat behind me. She really wants, I think you should maybe come back and interview the cat. I think she wants, no. But thank you so much for these great questions. And it was just fun to be here with you all. So thank you very much.
It was very much our pleasure. Thank you for helping us celebrate our 400th episode. I really enjoyed getting to meet you, and we'd love to have you on again real soon. So please stay within our general orbit if you can.
Yeah.
Our thanks to Nancy Cates and Gideon King and producer Lauren and all of our viewers and listeners. To close out the show this week, I would like, Lauren, if you could, if you still have it around, to play the full version of the Break the Business theme song written and recorded by Guinness World Record holder for most consecutive days writing a song, Jonathan Mann. I love this song, and I think it's a great way to cap off our 400th show.
Will do. And we'll see you next week.
Business isn't working, gotta break it apart. Rip up that three-piece suit, open up your heart. If the business isn't working, then it's time to break free. Do what you do and do it uniquely. Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power in the creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate the success, learn from the mistakes. If the business isn't working, done inside out. Near is far, left is right, and up is down. If the business isn't working, then it's not your fault. You must become your own